is where we'll start the Saturday afternoon game that was. It finished Scotland 17, France 36. And man, oh man, this was the best of the three games this weekend. I think England and Wales was its own dynamic and was very engaging by the end. Yeah. But this game was played at a blistering speed.
It had the grandstand finish that this game definitely didn't have.
Well, indeed. It was probably the finish that this game deserved, because the way it started, there was just this electric atmosphere in Murrayfield. There were loads of French travelling fans. True. And they were getting the noise up, and then the Scottish fans were responding with their own noise, of course. And it was just this raucous kind of very, very Six Nations atmosphere. It was the most Six Nations, I think, of any game that we've had since the pandemic. It was it really did feel, you've got the feel of that, like that almost undescribable, unmatched atmosphere in our game. The Six Nations atmospheres, they're just incredible, and this game had it all. And in that first half, what was playing out was just this brilliant game that could have been perhaps in Edinburgh, France, starting the game at a blistering speed, the Scots then coming back, and then it's all up for grabs. They nearly get that try on half time, then France go up the other end and score, and unfortunately in the second half Scotland do fall away, and they mismanage the game really entirely, and panic in many areas, and end up getting blown away. And it was a shame only in that, as impressive as the French were, by 60 minutes the crowd, all of that atmosphere was gone. There was the Marseillaise.
The Marseillaise was 63 minutes, I think, that was reverberating around. That's not great from the Scottish point of view. But
Murrayfield did get very quiet from the Scottish fans, and then that was kind of a sorry sight, and definitely felt like the atmosphere just got unplugged by some spectacular French play.
By some of that as well, yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, even from it opened with a bit of a curiosity. I think my remark at the time, because I think France kicked the first ball out on the full, and that engaged a Scottish scrum that then became a quick charge down, and then another scrum, and then another scrum, and before you know it, like 3 minutes of game time had elapsed, and we'd only had scrums. And I was just remembering back to Paris a couple of weeks before, going like, where was this France? Why didn't we play this France? But that France did show up, the quick starting one. It was just a stop-start kind of beginning, but boy, they kind of hit the ground running very quickly, and through like talismanic leaders like Dupont, who just, you know, he's kind of just shrugging off Scots for fun, and kind of undoing a lot of really good tactical stuff that Scotland were trying to do, the kicking game that they were trying to expose them with.
Exactly, it worked out. Like, there was definitely a little foreshadowing in the early part of the game when Chamonix missed a sitter of a penalty to start the game, and it was off. Daragh got a great steal, and what a performance from him. We'll touch on that. He had so many plays in this game.
He did.
But he opened the game with a great steal, taken to test rugby like a duck to water, and the Scots tried to run out, and then Marchand got in over the ball, and McAnally tried to clean him, missed. Gilchrist tried to clean him, missed. And that was in many ways a synopsis of the game. Marchand winning out over his opposite number, and one of those big Scottish locks. That was really the tight five, is where the biggest difference was in the game.
True.
But they missed the kick, and what ensues is this kicking battle, and this was something that we talked about as being so important in the game. And the Scots are very clever, and they had the wind behind them, and so France had their back three sitting way deep. And Finn decides that the option is to kind of peg a shallow, low kind of dribbler and send Darcy Graham after it.
It might have worked.
But what he didn't perhaps factor in was that he was kicking it in the direction of one little Antoine Dupont. And I mean, you could mention his name in 1,000 ways in this game, but it just on this
set the tone.
On this play alone, it was the way he just changed the game. This was going to be a tight tactical kicking matchup until he goes and beats one man, Darcy Graham, slips past Tui Pilato, and on the outside of, I think it was McAnally.
It might have been Daragh as well.
Or Daragh
gets outside Daragh, and then Daragh is the one who actually ends up making the tackle, but only after he sits down Ali Price.
He just keeps going, dances down the left touchline, and then of course Fiku, the other genius in this French team, comes in to play 9, pops it to Cyril Bay on a short line. The Scots are scrambling, and then they pop it off, and Marchand sits down Xander, and then just pops it off to Willemsen. It's just this explosive
finish to a very explosive kind of counter attack and transition, and just
changes the kicking game already.
When you can attack like that off kick return, it's just something magical. And you saw even in that England game, they had all kinds of opportunity to run stuff back from kick return, and didn't get anywhere near as much purchase as that particular one from Dupont. It was just something stellar, and it kind of shocked the Scots and took a very early lead, as they've been wont to do with this French side. They're starting very, very quickly, and even that their quick start didn't even end there, because I think there was a 50-22 off Was it off that very restart, or was that a 3-pointer subsequent to it? That
no, the Scots got 3 on the board, but it wasn't a 3-pointer that aged particularly well. Actually, they did manage to pull off. Darcy Graham took a catch like Mac Hansen, although it was down the centre of the field. That was a brilliant play off the restart, and a bit like being blown by the French, but then catching them with their pants down off the restart. There was a bit of deja vu there, although it did only yield 3 points. They got a penalty advantage for an offside, but then guess who? Gael Ficou, who won that matchup thoroughly between himself and Russell, shut down that play, reading where Russell was going to give it, and then the free play was gone. They kicked the 3. That 3 doesn't age well because it's off that restart.
That's the one where kick Chamonix kick 50-22.
I tell you what, it's a real error, and it's a brilliant kick from Chamonix. And it was a sign that, like, Scotland are already knowing France are not showing up in Murrayfield mode. This is the real France, hungry for a slam, and it's going to be a real challenge. They're pulling out class plays, but it's just off the backfield with the law the way it is. When you're box kicking from inside your 22 and you're not going for touch, you can't send the far winger up unless you have the fullback covering, and Hogg was covering very much the left from where it was kicked to the left side of the field. There was no one covering the right side of the field, so Chamonix just looks up and executes a perfect kick. But that's a bit of an error from the Scots.
It is. It did look to my eye now that it was Darcy Graham who probably bought up a little bit into the line where he didn't quite need to, and that was what was exposed. But it only takes a moment, and it was really well executed. And unlike most 50-22s, they didn't botch the line out. In fact, they scored off it. It was a really good sequence from France then off that to just seize them. And they look so good in the first quarter of this tournament. Really, they do. They just look sharp as anything and really attuned to where the ball should go, and taking scores for fun.
It's working defenses using their skill but doing it in such a smart way, and this is what Ficou gives them. But it was that shape on the on just a classic screen shape, and Ficou has the ball. He's got a man in front of him who's obviously marking him, so he can't truck it. But he has a short runner in Dante and then an out the back runner in Ntamack. And Chris Harris, Mr. Super Defender, is ready to hit either, like he so often is. So he's like, actually, you go short, I got Dante. You go out the back, I got Ntamack. I got them both. What are you going to do, Ficou? And so Ficou slips it to Dante, and then he bites it on Dante, and it's just the skill.
Quick
like, it just, out of nowhere, like faster than the camera can catch it between that set of hands. Takes the short option, but then gives it back to Ntamack, opens up the space. Harris buys in entirely, and then it's open season. And the Scottish Scramble D does really well to get across to Pinot, but then the offloads inside to Buy, and then
just
into
a couple of really good offloads in that one. It was a beautiful sequence of very, very French rugby. That was just a great start to the game. And then 12-3 after 13 minutes, and you're going, holy God, France are here to play. But in Scotland's defence, what followed was kind of their first offensive spell of the game, and then kind of they worked their way back into it as well. Their first one didn't quite go to plan in terms of their offensive set. They were repelled. France's defence was mighty throughout, and that was going to be true regardless of how they played it out.
Probably one of the themes of the game. And actually, like, if you look back, obviously in the second half, France are so hungry and they bring on their substitutes, and they really have the measure of Scotland at that stage. But in this early stage, like some of those little probing offensive sets, I felt like they just weren't giving that extra pass that they needed to be given. And actually it was Sione Tuipulotu who in a couple of positions
was in position to pass.
And he was, and it was off right and left, but he was put in that back position, the trail runner behind the screen, takes the ball and then just doesn't give it. He trucks it up twice, and that just that annoys me. I really think you need, when you're playing a blitz defense that gets on the inside and you're finding it so tough to get outside them, when you have opportunities, you have to be brave with the ball. And while Russell they need more guys in the midfield who can complete passes. And
this is where Johnson's absence has probably felt a little bit.
He was never like a second distributor type of centre, but I do feel like the rise of Tuipulotu was found out a little bit in this game. He wasn't ready for it. He doesn't quite have the offensive instincts to deal with a defence like that, and he made some mistakes. He ran into traffic, and on a couple of occasions in Scotland were repelled in those crucial opening sets that they had.
Breakdowns were so messy and so slow that any contact like that was going to disrupt it. And credit to the likes of Daragh for getting stuck into it. But then the other thing that was pulsating was the set piece battle, because early doors, Schumann managed to grab a scrum penalty against Antonio, which was the
first
very
flapped moment from Antonio in the tournament. Schumann is
just awesome. But the French, credit to them as well, just on a tactical point. In the first, I think it was 24 minutes, they'd already got 2 penalties from the the line out for Scotland kind of coming in and joining them all while the man was still in the air. And France were holding Woki particularly up there for just a little bit long to wait for that contact.
Let's see if they do something silly.
It was obviously something they'd done in the homework. Now, they did get warned after that particular second one not to leave him up there, but it had already yielded all the return you'd want from something like that. Just a little tactical little point that you'll make pre-match. So let's see if this will work. And it worked twice for them and yielded a couple of crucial pens.
And to be fair to the Scots, I mean, pretty much the opening 30 minutes it was kind of going against them. They obviously shipped those two great early scores. The game had settled down, and it had settled down into a game that France were squeezing them in.
Sure.
But they did show some quality and some class
to
come back into it. It was off a box kick, their own kicking game. Jaminet missed it, and then Duhan
dropped it cold, didn't he?
He did a little. He kind of misread it, and he didn't so much drop it as just not reach for a spot where it wasn't. The ball sat up, and Duhan proved, as he did a couple of occasions in this game, why when he gets the ball in broken field,
so dangerous.
There are a few more electric. They really are. He breaks away, charges up the field, and then they do have a great offensive set in the build up to that try, where they keep a bit of pace on the ball. They consistently, on a couple of occasions, Russell picks the right man outside of the blitz. Bradbury on one occasion he hits perfectly, sits a little deeper, doesn't take it to the line at all, just catches it, looks up and then finds the pass, trusts that other guys are going to be running off him and doesn't need to run anymore much because the defence is coming up. And then he gets the ball in the pivot position and tries to throw a skip pass outside, which Jaminet from fullback thinks he has the read on and comes in and gives away a... Like, was that a borderline card?
It was borderline card. Well, it was met with howls of derision from the Murrayfield faithful, and actually no more so than it was gasps because it was play on was called initially, and Pinot very nearly kind of kicked it on and scampered all the way away himself, but it was dragged back, and it was a penalty. He wasn't going for the ball. He was in a position to go for the ball, but then he tucked his head to get out of the way of the head contact, and that means you're not making an attempt to get the ball.
And he did kind of just come careening through, and he successfully shut down the play, but the Scots got the pen, kicked the corner, and then did a good red zone drive. It was a little slow.
It was slow because Price got held up at one point, and then they had to go again, but then they yielded a couple of penalty advantages, and they were under penalty advantage when they managed to find Daragh, who else but their man of the match.
He cut a very nice line, and Price did manage that period of the game really well, and they got back into the game, and that was when Murrayfield was at its most swell.
12-10, 30 odd minutes on the clock, and it's very much game on at that
momentum
point.
on,
because that particular period France were kind of reeling, and they were getting towards half time and they were struggling, and there was another, Russell was starting to probe really well at that point and finding some nice passes, and he very nearly found Hogg on one side, and then they went down the other side and nearly got Duhan into space, but Haining's pass was a little off, and then Duhan couldn't gather it.
It had to be perfect because the French defence was going so well, and that whole sequence leading up to half time was categorised by that. Like, there was one off a scrum where Russell ran right and Fiku went off to his outside man, so he took it on and nearly busted the line. I think Entmac just got him, but it was a bit of a line break, and he presents it and Price picks it up, and guess who's timed the rush perfectly is Dupont. Comes straight into his face, grabs him, drags him back. The set kind of gone, and that was when they flicked it back over, and Haining couldn't make a play, but they were, the pressure that they were putting on was brilliant. And then that was this huge moment just before the half started with exactly that. It was Dupont came flying in on Hogg in the backfield, got him, and Hogg this time gets a desperation pass away to Russell, and guess who? Fiku comes flying up in Russell's face, but Russell, to his credit, slips the ball away from Fiku as well, and they get it to Duhan, and then
sidling through.
It was later.
Lovely bit of waffle, kind of little interplay from when he got through there, and it found its way
switch with Harris.
Found its way into Harris's hands, and then from there it was panic mode. Literally, what was it? It was 38 minutes, I think, when that was happening, and that is nearly the halfway point of Scotland's tournament campaign. Just about half time in the middle game, and it was. It was
as if something washed over
eerily familiar picture, because they've had drops like that, cold drops of 7 points. They've had it in Dublin. I've been in attendance when they've done it. The same personnel. I've seen Hogg do it, and it's not necessarily the fact that the skill was poorly executed. The pass was overthrown, probably should have been gathered anyway, shouldn't have been thrown in the first place because there was only one French defender, and there was his halfback left of him, another man there, and then Hogg.
I think it's Harris more than Hogg. I think Hogg is he's at full tilt and he's reaching out to his left to try and gather it. It's a really tough catch, and it's certainly tough to catch with the momentum
pass to execute, especially when it's the wrong decision.
It was probably the worst straighten and give I've ever seen, because he cuts that switch line and then he straightens it and gives it instantly, which looks nice for for the cameras, but actually on that occasion was just so not the right thing to do. He had Ntamack drifting off him, and what he needed to do was kind of charge at Ntamack and make sure that Ntamack squared his shoulders and tried to tackle him. And then when he did that, he could have just dumped it off to Price on his left. And if Aldred is making it across, Price can just find Hogg. Easy try, mature play. And no, he just instantly, no sooner was he in the space than he'd thrown the skip pass towards Hogg. It wasn't on the money, and Hogg dropped it. And then, shudders and murmurs around Murrayfield and all of that, and it's 7 points on the floor and you're still behind, and it's a great time to score and it's an equally bad time to botch one, but that doesn't pardon the panic that follows, because like France were still gassed at that point and Scotland were still on top. It was still sustained pressure. The result of that was still a France scrum in their red zone or close to, and it was like there was only a minute or so left in the half. France would have been grateful to get in at half time 12-10 up, given the way the last 10 minutes had gone. And yet from the scrum it went down. It was a penalty. France get a penalty, kicked out Schoeman on this occasion. They kick down, they win the line out, and then through another sequence another penalty for taking out the lifter, and the same thing that you're doing over and over again, marching them down the field. They kick to pretty much the 22 then, and then it's 40 plus minutes. Then all of a sudden it's a goal line stand, which they can't deal with because the France execute it really well. And then France do dial into champion mode. They do, championship minutes. They would have been grateful to get off if they were still under the pump the way they were, but they were just, the pressure valve was so relieved by just kind of collectively Scotland getting into that mindset that's so bamboozling and I'm sure very frustrating for the Scots to look at, because it's just, there's no need for them to panic the way they do, and yet they do collectively. And it's not like the crime of Harris not choosing the right option in that moment is a bad one. Obviously it's a chance blown, but it doesn't fully explain just why the response to that moment is collective. It was our exact critique of them last year when they looked so good but lost that game against Wales, and was these moments either side of half time, their capacity to be the anti-All Blacks, the way the All Blacks dial it in. Scotland dial in their worst errors of the game in those crucial moments, and it's now consistent. And in this game it really did kill them, from a tight game to a blowout in a matter of like 3 minutes of game time, because it was 42 minutes on the clock when Fiku managed to finish that try, and he took that very well. What an effort from him. It was great. Like, love that he catches it in the midfield. Initially it looks like he's running lateral, which would be like if Gary Ringrose was doing it and very annoyed, like straighten guys, but then he actually read it perfectly because he knew he had the gas to get outside the last covering legitimate defender and isolate Ali Price out there on his own on the wing and just do him one-on-one, which is what he did. He's such a savage player, Gael Fiku. He's in some form as well, but he's between his athleticism and his capacity to read the game, he's starting to rival Lukhanyo Am, so he is as a midfield genius. I think that's your number one midfield in the world anyway, but but he's playing some phenomenal stuff. Is Gael Fiku, and they take that try. Then to start the second half, obviously a bizarre try that kills the game, and it's Ali Price really just unnecessarily trying to buy a penalty off Wokey, gets himself into trouble. And it's France's unsung hero, Francois Cross, who makes all kinds of hidden plays. He's one of these like mystery men who hides. The commentators never notice that it's him making the play. It always seems to pass people by. He had another couple of steals in this game, but he does it like on the far side of the camera. He's just like a man in disguise making all kinds of plays, and he gets up, causes Ali Price to spill the ball when he's trying to do his milk a penalty thing. And they do get a break here, France, because Wokey catches the broken ball from his offside position that they're trying to buy from the ground, and it's bizarre that the ref doesn't pick up on that. And so he just pops it up, and then Fiku, I see that all the time. You're not allowed to play the ball on the ground, and yet when people are gathering possession they seem to get away with it. It's bizarre. I don't know why. Raining in the ball on the deck and popping it up. It was just complete blind spot, like, because Price was trying to milk the penalty and there wasn't a penalty there, fair enough, but the guy was offside and then the ball bounced to him and he played it, he popped it up, so that was a weird one. But as it was, the Scots were really reeling, and Fiku gets the ball in the broken field, and it's a 2-on-2. It shouldn't be a break for Pinot, but he does this little straighten with one hand, and Duhan just gets sucked into his majesty. He does, and then he just flicks it out. Runner, to be honest. And he finds Pinot then as Duhan squares his feet for no reason and is facing in, and he finds Pinot on the outside. Pinot puts the little chip in, takes a wild French bounce, and Dante benefits from jogs in. He deserved one. He did. He was mighty throughout. His hands have improved no end. He actually the Australian tour he was on last year really kind of made him
a real feature in this squad. And geez, looking at those centres now, it's going to be tough for guys like Vakatawa to get back into this team.
Yeah, I wouldn't pick him right now. No, he's not in the form to justify it.
No, indeed, and that's just serious options that this French team have, and just serious weapons out there. And yes, it was another just beautifully taken try, but then that's the swing then in it, like, and it goes back to that Hogg moment as well. Like, it didn't need to. It was 7 points on the floor, sure, but it didn't need to be compounded into effectively a 21-point swing in 5 minutes of play. But that's what they ended up with, and then suddenly the gap was 16, because in both of those very important tries, Jaminet, who had been having a rough day from the boot, it was a windy day in Murrayfield and he'd missed a couple, but the one just before half time from the touchline bisected the posts to make it 19-10, and then just after half time again from an angle bisected the post once more and made it 26-10, which is just suddenly a 16-point game. Massive task for Scotland, and massive thing to come back from, but doesn't necessarily again excuse their rationale for trying to do that by running at them from everywhere.
Indeed, they played a very naive game from that point, and actually, to be fair, they probably held it together for a little bit. They had a couple of red zone sets that they got that were turned over.
It was a familiar tale being painted of their own worst enemy. Like, they'd get a bit of pressure, get into a good position, and then it would be their own ill discipline that would do it either. Like, at one point on 15 minutes or so, they went off their feet when they were like near the 5 meters thing. They were just diving over the top.
That was
of their own ball.
Haining coming over Fagerson. That was a set that they
had to yield.
It just ran out of steam. It was off a line out, but really the play before they should have done better as well. They had some decent attacks. They got in on 52 minutes. Kroos again made another disguised steal straight off a maul. They got the ball to the back, and then he just got his arms over and poached the ball, and they got a penalty. And I think it was from there. I think about 52 minutes that Scotland resolved to basically stop playing rugby, because even after they'd gone 26-10 down, they settled down a little, got themselves a couple of red zone sets, were repelled by that phenomenal French defence, which was eating them alive in the contact area and at the breakdown. Aldred with some huge plays, Dante on the inside, Kroos everywhere,
Fiku shutting most things down.
It was very impressive stuff. And then from there they gave up on their own game. The Scottish game at its best is kicking yourselves into a position where you can launch off a kind of a midfield set piece, and they abandoned that. They really stopped going to it. They started running the ball from everywhere. They had another as well, Movaka, on one of Scotland's many attempts, but one of their better ones. They managed to work a little bit of space for Darcy Graham after a good kicking exchange. He got to run back at the defence, tried a little chip and chase, and then Movaka plucks it out of the air, dances past a few players and completely flips the script of the game. And then Scotland are backed up, and what do? Lose patience, run the ball again, start running the ball against a defence that's matching up so well against them. Inevitably going through all the phases that they were going through, they ended up getting stripped by guess who? Gail Fiku. And then they move the ball to the right, and Penaud jogs in for an easy score.
Relatively handy one for that one, unopposed, and just a hammer blow. That was the fifth at that point, and it was already a good game, and it could have been any score really for that period. Scotland were with the ball doing kind of helter-skelter mad stuff and not looking like they were going to get any purchase, and then when it was inevitably turned over, they at this point were really struggling to deal with what France were bringing then, and bar a few really good Daragh steals that were popping up throughout the game, they would have been losing this by quite a bit more. Like, at one point they were really close on the 5 metre line and hammering away, and then Daragh managed to get in on like 70 odd minutes and steal that, and it's just
the last 20 as well. Like they resolved, I don't know what Gregor Townsend was thinking, but they were like, we're going to still play this helter-skelter from our own half, try and score all of the points we need right now, style of rugby, but we're also going to take Finn Russell off and put Blair Kinghorn at 10, and I think it's safe to say that experiment's put to bed. He found a nice try at the end of the game, dancing through, because he's a pretty solid fullback option for them, but at 10, put in that position, especially with the way Scotland's offence works, where everyone's sitting really wide, especially when they're chasing a game, he actually can't make the passes that Russell can make, and I understand the frustration with Russell. He didn't play a great game here. He got outdone by Fiku. He couldn't open up the defence.
It's more the brains trust in general, not just Russell, but the Russell Hogg axis between them, and then the collective of all of the whole team just panicking the way it was. That's where you kind of
indeed he's frustrating, but they don't have another option at 10 who can work an offence at all. Like they just become a very different, very limited team without him. He's what gives them their offensive X factor, and without him it gets very, very ugly.
It does.
As Blair Kinghorn was trying those same skip passes that Russell tries and missing quite a few of them.
It's true. They were under all kinds of pressure, and then another turnover. The final try for France came from a nice little flat kick.
Good little set piece move.
Nice little strike move for again Pinot to just glide in unopposed over on the far side with I think it was Graham chasing over, but nowhere near. That was another very tidy one to wrap up France's scoring. Scotland did get that consolation try you alluded to there with Blair Kinghorn on the counter attack finding Doohan, and Doohan going in for a deserved score because he was kind of game all day long, and it kind of went to and fro. It's always a tough task when you have Pinot opposite you and you have to defend those French, but with the interventions he did contribute as well. But Scotland were just not quite at the races here, and France very much were. They were looking awesome, looking every inch the probable champions that they are at this point.
The defence is extraordinary. The forward operators that they have just making all kinds of plays. They beat up on that Scottish tight five. I think Gilchrist and Skinner, like, they were routinely missing clean outs. They weren't able to physically impose themselves at all. And then Gael Ficou we've talked about, but Dupont as well. I was saying, like, this performance from Dupont for me was like, I have been very much leaning on the Aaron Smith's still the best 9 in the world. Look at that man pass and run a tempoed offense. I've been on that side of the fence there, and like, Aaron Smith could yet win me back, and he is awesome. But I think you have to give it to Dupont now. You might even have to give best player in the world to Dupont now, because this performance, like, on all sides of the ball, was incredible. And it was
defensive plays where he did have Ali Price in his back pocket. It seems some of the charging he did away, break from the line. He knows perfect timing to do that. His deceptive physicality.
But the marriage of all of his attributes, his speed, his physicality, with just this genius brain on all sides of the ball, where he just understands the game so well. He's making brilliant reads, like an outside centre, like Lecanio Am on defence, knows exactly when to shoot, so rarely makes an error, sticks all of his tackles, makes explosive defensive plays. We know about his offence, how good he was on the kick return, but the tempo that he runs. And then even little things like the scrum. The scrum, as you say, was this pulsing battle. And whenever Dupont fed it, like a few times in this game, when he noticed that the Scots had the edge, he would wait and he would linger and he'd be like, no, if I put this ball in, I think the Scots are going to go forward. And that was the only reason he was doing it, but he was feigning some complaint to the ref, and then he'd allow the French to adjust, and then if he had to put it in, he'd put it in only after the adjustment. And you could see the Scots getting frustrated, like Xander's like, I have an edge, I want to push, we're going to put it in, and then he kind of loses his momentum, and then the ball comes in. Like, even the timing of that from Dupont was so class. I mean,
true.
I want to say
his capacity to clear rucks, I think it wasn't quite as much as challenged in this game as it had been, but I think it might have been even in that All Black game, but some of the ones for Toulouse as well. His capacity to clear rucks that are under serious pressure is probably better than any 9 out there. Like, very often you see a 9 get scragged, and then he's in. When he gets scragged, he manages to get it away and get the ball away very quickly, which is a useful skill, particularly for a French type offense. You want to clear those rucks as best you can. He's expert at it.
He's starting to look nearly as complete a player as any that I've seen since maybe O'Driscoll.
He does look a very, very tidy asset, and that's not to say that they're not swimming in choices, because like Luku played well when he came on as well, and they also behind Luku have just a smorgasbord of other like test level caliber scrum halves that other teams would be like chomping at the bit to get in there. Certainly I think we could use some French level halfbacks just in our terms of our offensive kind of inklings, but Dupont is just a level above all of those guys, who I wouldn't even worry about, to be honest. Like Huyu was great in the summer in Australia.
You'd just be worried about the
lack of Dupont. It's not that the halfback
position
is going to be compromised.
Isn't going to make those plays.
Like just going to be missing a world class Dupont. So he's a serious asset that they're going to build this team around, and they're dead right too. Like Le Petit Général, it is very much the tradition. The 9 is very much more of a fulcrum than the 10 in French rugby traditionally, and for it to be this guy at the minute just puts them in a really, really strong place. He's looking brilliant.
The defense, the Edwards defense looks incredible. Everything looks incredible. The only fear that they'd have is that they're peaking too early, but that doesn't matter. What matters now for them is seeing this tournament out. They look head and shoulders the best team in it. They've two games to go, and
three from three so far. One home, one away, or one away, one home. That's how they round it off. They look good enough for it. They definitely should be putting the foot in the accelerator.
Absolutely. And then on the flip side for Scotland, obviously another year goes by. They didn't win it. I was just kind of the summary of the Scots is that they're a good team. They do lots of things right. They have lots of exciting players. They'll never be a great team unless they get wiser.
Yeah.
They're so immature for a team of as much years as they have.
Years and as many caps as they do have
yeah.
in key positions. But yeah, they do just play a bizarrely stupid game sometimes, and it just defies kind of form and caliber of player, and just flies against all of that. It's very hard to read because they implode sometimes.
Yeah,
it's very tough to
we'll
watch.
Contrast with the game that we're about to watch.
Yeah.
Scotland being 16 points down and flipping the whole script on their game plan and panicking and being jittery in everything that they do, versus Wales being 17 points down at Twickenham and being totally calm and just trying to get some opportunities
and eventually getting some opportunities.
Yeah, exactly.
One of these things is not like the other, and it's just wisdom is definitely something lacking in the Scottish camp. But that being said, like it was teed up to be a great game, and if that Harris moment had gone to hand and Scotland take the lead into half time, maybe we would have been treated to the humdinging classic that we might have had with Grandslam or Grandstand finish and all. But to be honest, I still think that probably France would have edged it just on balance, even if Scotland had played their A game for the full 80 minutes without panic mode being pressed. But as it was, it's credit to France the fact that Scotland ended up folding the way they do, because that is born of the pressure and the scores that they got and just the quality they were showing all over the park. So yeah, no, they're totally deserved winners, and bonus point winners as well. So very useful if it does come down to 4 wins, but they're hunting 5.
They are, and geez, who could deny them now? Awesome performance from the French. Much respect. Well, no. Well, from Ireland's perspective, absolutely not.
Thank you very much for watching that video. If you're new here, please do like and subscribe and ring the bell so you get notified when we upload again. But mainly, please drop a comment down below. We enjoy hearing your thoughts on it. Thanks.